There is a time and a value in being brave and being bold, in being audacious. We're talking today about what it looks like and means for us to be audacious every day, starting right now. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders like you grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively, make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be live in the future, joining us for future episodes before they make it to the podcast on your favorite social media channel. You can find out about when those are happening, who those guests are, and get some other inside scoops on occasion by joining our LinkedIn or Facebook groups, two of the channels where we live stream these events. You can go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to join in the fun there. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world more complex and uncertain than ever, that's right? Leaders need a new perspective and a fresh set of tools to create the great results their organizations and team members need. That's what Flexible Leadership provides you. You can learn more and order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. And with that, I'm going to bring in my guest. She comes to us. There she is. I'm going to introduce her, and then we're going to dive in. Her name is Anne Marie Anderson. She is a 3-time Emmy award-winning broadcaster. And if you're watching, you can see those beautiful statuettes behind her. She's a keynote speaker and author of the book, Cultivating Audacity: Dismantle Doubt and Let Yourself Win. As she walked through ESPN's doors fresh out of college, she embarked on a career that led her into the boardrooms and locker rooms of some of the most successful franchises in sports, utilizing methods observed through behind closed doors coverage of high-performing coaches, athletes, and executives. She applied their ability for taking bold and sometimes surprising risks to her own personal and professional life. The knowledge and experience she gained has made one intrepid career move after another, which led her to being one of the most experienced female play-by-play announcers in the country. Anne Marie, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Kevin, I'm delighted to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So I've had World Series winning pitchers, I've had Super Bowl winning linebackers, but I've had Grammy Award winners. I've never had an Emmy Award winner, and so welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you. We're rounding it out then.
We're starting to round. We're continuing to round it out. Well, after almost 500 episodes, I suppose we ought to have. Hopefully, we have a little bit of variety for folks. Listen, I'm so glad that you're here. We had a false start. You were ill when we were going to do this before, so I've been looking forward to our conversation. I'd like to start by having you tell us just a little bit more about that journey, because the folks who are listening, who are sports fans, really their ears perked up. But even for those who aren't, I think you've got an interesting journey. So just give us a little bit about sort of what leads you from walking in the doors at ESPN to us having this conversation.
Sure. So at 21 years old is when I was able to get a 6-month temporary job at ESPN, working 6 at night to 3 in the morning, 6 days a week, Mondays off, for $15,000 a year, right? That's the way we start. And it was fantastic. And I just held on. I'm in my 36th year now as a broadcaster. And I did the work that is necessary in order to climb the ladder. I spent 10 years behind the scenes, producing, cutting highlights, doing everything, hiring people. I was a camera operator until I made the move in front of the camera, which was terrifying. And that's when I learned to really embrace fear and shut out my inner critic. And the last 25 years have been on camera, just to keep changing my career as we have to roll. So now I'm a play-by-play announcer. I have been a sideline reporter before, an anchor, and all of it.
All right. So that's a little bit about the journey, but none of that story tells us the story of why there's a book. Why the book then?
The book is because I've come across so many people, especially, in 2 different groups, right? There's that young people who are just starting their careers, and there's people about 45 to 55 who want to be doing something else. And the big question always is like, how do I get started? What I don't understand how I get there. And you can't get there until you figure out what's been in your way. And so, as throughout my career and through coaching people, I've learned there's generally speaking four things that tend to be in our way. It's either fear, time, money, or your inner critic. Finally, I decided to write it in a book where we break down each barrier, examine kind of what we can do with it. Because I don't believe, Kevin, in like pushing down your fears or overcoming fears. They're always going to be there. So I'm interested in how we can use whatever has been in our way in the past to propel us forward.
You actually suggest that we should make friends with our fear.
Yeah.
So why don't we talk about that? Since you brought it up, why don't we talk about that for a second? What do you mean by that, and why would you make such an audacious suggestion?
Well, because a lot of times we're told like there's plenty of programs, overcome your fears. Well, how do you do that? That's not human nature. Fear is there to serve a purpose. Fear, in my view, is an invitation to grow. And so instead of using all this energy to shove it down and push it away, I say make friends with it, meaning accept that it's going to be there and get curious about it. What is it that you're actually afraid of? Catastrophize it. What if all of that happens? And
I
what
thought I was the only one that used that word, by the way, catastrophizing.
no,
So
yeah, catastrophize the whole thing to the end where you're going to die destitute and alone and then think, is that really going to happen?
well, the odds of that happening are not very high, right?
No.
There was a great book in the 80s. I mean, I don't really remember much about the book, but the title was phenomenal. Feel the fear and do it anyway, which is another way of saying what you're saying. I believe that was woman's name was Susan Jeffers. Someone will probably correct me if I'm wrong. But I've always loved that title. And you're saying the same thing. Like, we're not trying to suppress it, remove it. We're trying to acknowledge it and say, how does it serve me? Right.
Yes. Yes, that's the key. Not just recognizing it, but how does it serve me and how has it hindered me? So, as an example, like my first time going on air, I'd already been at ESPN for 10 years. I was terrified going on air that I was going to be
Yeah.
bad, that I was going to be embarrassed, that I was going to be judged, all of that. And of course, all that happened. You're never good on television your first time.
Well, you're never good at anything the
Never
first time.
riding
Right?
your bike, nothing. And so it's about, okay, all those things happened. And what happened? I got data to get better the next time. If I just wallowed in the fear, I would have no opportunity to learn what was I embarrassed about? What was I judged on? How did I think I failed in certain things to be able to get up there the next time and try it again?
So there are some of us,
Mhm.
and I'm speaking to you as everyone as leaders. Some of us as leaders have this challenge that I'm about to mention, and all of you likely have people on your team who have this same challenge. Like you said, you were afraid of whether you would fail, that you would just do poorly, uh, and then the last one, which is where I'm headed, is
Judgment.
being judged. And so as I said, all of us have a little bit of fear around being judged. For some of us, it's a big deal. And again, as leaders, for some of your folks, it's a big deal. And so, especially if it's not for you, you really need to hear what we're going to talk about. So, Anne Marie, what advice do you have to people specifically around that fear of being judged by others?
The key advice here is building a front row. And a front row are people whose advice matters to you, who are doing big things on their own, who will help you grow and challenge you and lift you up. The reason you need that front row is for the other people that judge you, they don't get a vote. Laura Gassner Otting in her book Limitless said, why give a voice to somebody who shouldn't even have a vote? And that's true. Like if the other people judging you aren't part of this front row that you've created to drive yourself forward, then that's just noise because you're working on you and going forward. So be careful once you create your front row, cut out the noise of the other people and just focus on the feedback you're getting.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that, so yeah, like any of us that do anything where we have the chance to be seen by a lot of people,
Mhm.
there's the chance that you're going to get all sorts of feedback, and some of it will not really fall in line with anything else, right? And
Yeah.
so, like I would say, like if I've gone and given a session to a
Mhm.
bunch of leaders, and there's someone in the room who's a plumber, no disrespect to plumbers, and their feedback to me is not really all that great. It's not relevant. It's just not
Right.
relevant. Now, plumber or no, if I hear that same feedback 45 times, at some point I need to take note of that. And you're not saying not to do that, but what you're saying is that front row, those folks that have your best intention, that
Right.
their best intention is on you being successful, that
Yes.
you want to always value that, and know that they're going to be honest with you, and know that they do want the very best for you, and having those folks in your life that you're willing, that you will ask and they will willingly share is super valuable. How do we determine who those people are? Because it's not necessarily just the people closest to us,
No.
right? Like, so say a little bit more about determining who's on your front row.
I'll tell you first who's not in your front row. It's probably not your mom. It's probably not your best friend, right? Because they want you to be safe. Your front row isn't a bunch of people who are going to tell you you're great. It shouldn't be. It needs to be people who are going to tell you the truth. So, the first thing I look for when I'm building a front row is somebody who's doing big things in their own life as well. Doesn't have to be in the same arena as me, but somebody who's working to grow and get feedback coming back. Because remember, as you're talking about, oh, if you hear it 45 times from outside, you can bring that to your front row and say to them, here's something I'm getting. How do I work with this? So your front row needs to be people that are going to tell you the truth, that are going to lift you up, that are doing big things on their own. And when you ask them to be in your front row, listen to how they respond because you're giving somebody a role in your life. There's a social connection there and a significance. And be aware of what their barriers may be because we're all seeing things through our prism. So if they're afraid of risk, and you're trying to take some risks, they could be a great friend to you, a great colleague, but maybe they don't belong in your front row because of their bias against risk.
Yeah, and again, that doesn't mean they're not in your life. Doesn't mean they're not
Oh,
your
no.
friend. It just means you're identifying, uh, basically a set of expectations for a group of people that can really serve you effectively, and being careful about who those people are. Really important.
Yeah,
And as a leader, by the way, it's probably not the people on your team either. It's not mom.
right.
It's not your best friends. Probably not the people on your team, at least not in general, because you know. Positional power is a thing.
Yeah.
That's for
It could be a
sure.
leader, Kevin, I'm sorry. It could be a leader at another corporation or company who has the same idea of what you're going through. And your front row can be 3, 4 people. It doesn't need to be this big mass of people. So you're exactly right. It isn't somebody on your team. It's somebody who understands your challenges.
Yeah, I love that. Which means, so how would you say, or would you say then? I mean, I know that the phrase "the front row," of course, applies to your work in sports.
Mhm.
Is it different than a team of mentors?
Yes, it is a
In what
different
ways?
mentors. Mentorship a lot of times is one way, right? They are helping you, but you're not necessarily offering value back to them just by the hierarchy of mentorship. Front row works best when it is reciprocal. When you are working with somebody else or a group of people to help elevate each other. And that's the difference for me between a front row and mentorship because you learn by hearing their challenges, by trying to help them work through, by being inspired by them getting back up again after they have failed or been knocked down.
So the key word in my intro to our conversation, audacity, is the key word in the book,
Mhm.
Cultivating Audacity. That's who we're talking to today, is the author of that book, Anne Marie Anderson. And so I'm curious about that word audacity because, like, okay, I don't know you, right? We've now been interacting for about 25 minutes, about 15 of which have been on the show. And but I know something about you because I read the book. Um, but that's what I got. And I wouldn't even have to read the book to watch you, and to place myself in the position of someone in the audience and say, well, easy for her to be audacious. I mean,
Mhm.
you can tell that she's got this outgoing personality. You can tell she's kind of vivacious. That's the audacity would seem to be. That's like part of who she is. That's not me, Anne Marie. I'm not bold and I'm not brave. So talk to us about audacity in the context of how people might see themselves in relationship to that word.
Audacity and extrovert. are two very different ideas. It's funny, Kevin, that you say that because yes, I talk on television, so I'm used to being on camera and it's out here. If we're at a party, I'm in the corner. So I actually am an introvert. So, but I have forced myself and learned to be more outgoing and more bold, if you will. I was not a
Situationally, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to interrupt you anyway, right?
yes,
Like, so that's the thing I want to say to all of you, everybody,
yes,
is that um, extroversion and introversion, just if we're going to use that frame, is a I would call it a flexor. In other words, you're not only one or the other, you're somewhere between them. And you can
yes,
choose, you have a tendency, but you
yes.
can choose situationally to move to a new place, and you can pick a new place on that spectrum to be at any given time. So I needed to get that in there because you're so right. And that's so important. So now continue.
Yes, and please, you can always interrupt me. We're having a conversation. I'm good with it because it is for me, I had to take calculated, bold risks. And how do you talk yourself into that? Part of it is catastrophizing, which you and I have talked about, like what is the very worst that could happen? And part of it is what happens if I don't? One thing that I am good at is understanding that I don't want to have regrets. And that came as a result of a tragedy at work when I was only 23 years old at ESPN, where a colleague of mine for whom I had interned, yes, it's the introduction, entered work. He had just gotten his dream job, just gotten married, 37 years old, fit, dream job, life going great. And on his sixth day at work, before he'd even anchored Sports Center, he was still training, he collapsed and died. And as I was performing CPR on him unsuccessfully, I kind of came to the realization I was 23 years old that if you can be 37 and newly married and starting your dream job and have it ripped away in a moment, that I was never going to wait for anything again. That was life changing for me. And that's where my audacity journey began. You don't need a tragedy to get you there. For me, that was the moment of me realizing I don't know how much time. And so I don't want to have regrets. I want to try everything and anything and see what lands.
So, so since you bring that up, let's talk about you talk in the book about what you call the urgency fallacy.
Yeah.
And so you just talked about, hey, I'm going to push forward and all that sort of thing. And yet there is a fallacy around urgency. So talk about that, sort of the balancing back what you just said just a little bit.
Yeah, I think that we have a couple of things going on. One, our lives are so urgent. Now that we are attached to a phone, it feels as if everything is urgent. We get a text, we get an email, we get a request for something, and it feels like we have to answer that right away because we're available and everybody knows we have it. What happens is our lives can be completely consumed by urgent tasks. So, what I ask people to do is separate things that are urgent from those that are important. And here's how you can tell. Things that are urgent are usually a response to a request. Somebody asks you, hey, can you get me that report? Can you answer my text? Can you answer my email? They usually have a deadline. I need it by this time. And they usually, if it's urgent, can be completed pretty quickly with a sense of accomplishment. That's what the to do list is, right? Where we tick it off. Things that are important require more time and consideration, and they move us closer to our values, vision, goals, and who we want to be. If we don't create space, intentional space to do what's important, urgent will consume our day and then we put it off till tomorrow. So I recommend at least an hour a day of doing what's important that will move you forward. And most of us don't have an hour continuously. So chunk it up if you need to, where everything shuts down, because that email that's urgent can wait 15 minutes.
It
Almost
certainly can.
everything can
It
wait 15.
certainly can. Like, chances are, hopefully you're not doing that while you're listening to us, because if you are, you're not serving either the the person you respond to, or the show very, very well, actually. Yeah, you and I could talk about that. We are on the same boat on all that. And here's the thing: if you want to have that hour, however you have to block it up, you need to put it on the calendar and then hold it dear. You can't let it go again. It's got to stay
Absolutely.
on the calendar.
Absolutely.
So talking about audacity, and so far we've really talked about it, Anne Marie, from from a personal perspective,
Mhm.
which I wanted us to start with, and you certainly talk about that in the book. But obviously, people that are here are wearing two hats. They're wearing the hat of I'm a human. They're also wearing the hat of I'm a leader.
Yes.
So, what thoughts would you have about leadership audacity, or how do we need to think about audacity in our role as a leader?
When I speak to corporate audiences, businesses, firms, I talk about being a shape shifting leader. Because in my decades in the boardrooms and locker rooms of some of the most successful franchises in sport, the thing that I saw amongst the elite leaders was a willingness to take risks. And that's what audacity is. It's a willingness to take bold risks. They're not so attached to the outcome. Great leaders are not so attached to the outcome. They know that the audacity, the win in audacity is in the action. And so, as a leader, when you can inspire your people to take action without fear of massive repercussions of failure, then you can start to build a more audacious culture. And to do that, you got to be a shape shifting leader and know each person's gifts.
Excellent. So, I can't have you on and not talk a little bit about your work, because I think that even for folks who aren't big sports fans, I think whenever I get the chance to talk to people who are in roles that people recognize, and they sort of see them at a distance, I think it's always useful and interesting to have that conversation. So, what what is the best part at this point in your career? You've talked about the various things you've done in sports broadcasting as a play-by-play person. What's the best part of the job?
The best part of the job for me is seeing people push themselves to be elite. I love watching people and their bodies do things that they've trained for, and then when the lights are on, it goes well. I see a lot of people crushing too, but boy, when it works for them, I don't care what sport it is, I get so excited seeing athletes reach a new level.
Favorite sport to announce?
Oh, I love them all of my analysts. I played volleyball, so that one's the
I mean,
easy.
it's an unfair question for me to ask, because someone's gonna listen and say, "Well, we're not gonna give her that gig because she's not our favorite." No.
Yeah, yeah, but I love all of it because, again, I work with an analyst in each sport.
Right.
So, I get to work with, a five-time Olympic medalist water polo player, a WNBA champion, Bill Walton was a partner of mine before he
Well,
passed.
there's a set of stories I'm sure
There
we could have.
set of stories with Bill Walton. God rest his soul, he was awesome. So I love the partnership that I have where I can be the viewer and ask the questions the viewer wants to know. How did that happen? Why did that happen? How can they stop that from happening again? That's my job as a play-by-play.
Uh, I have this conversation with my wife all the time. You watch a movie, you watch a television show, and you know that half of what's happening in whatever profession it is isn't actually what actually happens, right? Like that would never happen. What are a couple of the biggest misconceptions that we might collectively have about doing play by play or doing live sports?
That it's easy. So many people say all the time, "I can do that," and they get up there, or if they get the opportunity, and they just talk over it, and here's the biggest misconception: the really good play-by-play announcers, it's not about them. You may not even know their names. It's about the athletes, and it's about setting up the analyst, and I think too many times people, especially for the play-by-play role, they think, "Oh, I can do that," and it's about them and not the audience, and so it requires work and preparation. I don't get up there and wing it. There's a misconception for you. People think, "Oh, I get up there and wing it." No, there's days and days of preparation for each event. I know everybody's background, everybody's skills, everybody's past injuries. It's prep.
How to pronounce their names, which name is with which number, and a
Yeah.
hundred other things like that, right? I have sat
Yes.
across the aisle on airplanes many times with folks who were uh, living in Indianapolis. They were coming to do a Colts game, and
Mhm.
the books are out, and the whole flight, all they're doing is studying.
Oh, yeah.
And not That's just one example. I can think of several.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's like anything else. You and I are having this conversation before we started
Mhm.
about preparation for this, right? And when we arrive ready, we're better. We have a better chance of being successful. And I think there are two things that you just said that I would hope all of you as leaders would take. One is that preparation piece,
Yes.
but the other piece is there's an awful, just like there are play by play folks who talk too much.
Mhm.
There are a lot of leaders that talk
Yes.
too much as well. So you could go back, everybody, just listen to that short little snippet, and take out play-by-play announcer and put in leader, and it would all we should be trying to set up our team just like Anne Marie's trying to set up her analyst.
Kevin, I really love that your book is called Flexible Leadership, right? Because that's a huge part of it too. And that's another part that I have seen amongst the best leaders. There it is. Beautiful. And such an important point. And, if anybody watched, I don't know if you're a sports fan, if you watched The Last Dance during COVID about the Bulls' final season, you really got an idea of how Phil Jackson was a shape shifting leader in allowing Dennis Rodman to go to Vegas in the middle of the season, but never would allow that for Michael Jordan. Because, as he put it, Dennis Rodman doesn't need basketball. He didn't need it, it wasn't his identity, but they needed Rodman in order to win. So he had to do what was needed to keep Rodman engaged. Michael Jordan, his whole identity was basketball. So he's not going to send him off for a weekend in Vegas because his needs were different. Flexible leadership. I can't wait to read your book because flexible leadership and a shape shifting leader tie together so well.
So, Anne Marie, there's a lot of stuff we could have talked about. And if this wasn't on a recording and I could just talk to you about sports, we would do that. But I know that that's not the purpose of this show, nor what best serves our audience. But I am curious
Mhm.
if there's something that I didn't ask that you thought I might or wish I would have asked.
I think the only thing I would want, you're so prepared, which is beautiful. I think the thing that I would want people to know that are listening is that going back to that one point, this isn't an innate trait. You have to learn and challenge yourself and practice being audacious. It isn't something that just comes naturally, not skilled audacity, because there are reckless risks and there are risks that are worth it. And that's a very important part of cultivating audacity in your life.
I'm writing that down. There are reckless risks, everybody, and
Mhm.
there are risks worth taking. I hope that there have been multiple times during the show that something that Anne Marie has said that stopped you in your tracks. You have the advantage, everybody, of hitting the pause button. I don't. I have to do it in real time. So I want to know, Anne Marie. It's clear that you love your work,
I do.
but life is more than work. What do you do for fun?
I do any sport possible. I play golf, I play volleyball, I spend a lot of time. I have 3 kids who are now growing up and I take them with me. When we talk about like how much I love my work, the assignment I'm going to spend the rest of my day on after this is preparing to go overseas to call international volleyball competition. And part of my agreement with this company is that I get to bring my children. And so when you ask what I do for fun, part of it is being able to expose them to different parts of the world. So they'll come with me and see international competition in Rio, Istanbul, China, Poland, the Netherlands, everywhere I'm going this summer, and then get to experience the culture and see how life is different in different parts of the world and how similar we are as well.
And both of those things are true.
Mhm.
So what are you reading these days? Maybe there won't be a lot of books with you on the trip. I don't know, or maybe it'll all be on the Kindle. But what are you reading right now?
I am reading Good Awkward by Henna Pryor. Henna's book, first of all, it's so well written and it's a lot of fun. And she's talking about working through the moments where we felt kind of awkward or we feel awkward in addressing a group or handling a problem and her tips to work with it. I really am enjoying Good Awkward by Henna Pryor.
It sounds like there's a connection to making fear your friend. I'm just going to bet on that. Where can we learn more about your work, Anne Marie? Get the book. Like, where do you want to point people before we wrap up?
Sure. If you're interested in the book, you can get the first chapter free at www.cultivatingaudacity.com. And there's exercises in there you can do. It's going to be out on Audible soon. And then if you want to potentially work with me, you can find me at annemarieanderson.com. I answer all those messages myself. So
That's
check it.
Anderson with an O-N,
It
everybody.
is.
Anne Marie. Anne with an E.
And with an E, Marie, as Bill Walton said when we first met, he said, Anne Marie, I'm Bill with 2 L's. And I said, Anne with an E, Marie, Bill, nice to meet you.
After we end, I'm going to have to ask a Bill Walton question. But anyway, everybody, before we go and before I say goodbye to Anne Marie, a question for all of you. If you've been here before, you know the question. I'm not apologizing for that. The question is now what? What are you going to do as a result of this? Maybe you're going to think differently about that word audacity and how it applies to you. Maybe you're going to think differently about risks. Maybe you're going to think differently in a lot of different ways. But I want you to do more than just say that, that was a good idea. What I really want you to do is to take action. And I'm not here to prescribe what that action should be for you, but rather to encourage you to do that. Because until you act on something that you learned here, this is maybe a little better than entertainment. But until you take action on it, then it becomes really valuable. And I hope that you'll do exactly that. Anne Marie, thanks for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
Wonderful talking with you.
And everybody, if you liked this and this was your first time, make sure it's not your last. And if you've already been here before, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.